Hello heroes and villains, welcome to Multiverse. Today we are going to talk about the DC Universe announcement by James Gunn. I'm a bit late to the party, but yesterday I thought it was more important to talk a bit about the DCO devs because a lot of you guys did seem to be worried about the dev situation with DC Universe Online. So it seemed more important yesterday to talk about the devs, but today let us talk about the new DC Universe announcement by James Gunn. I saw a few people who already right off the bat were critiquing not just the announcement itself, but the way it was announced. Basically, they were talking about James Gunn's poor showmanship, the poor editing, or how it looked a bit cheap, how they could have used something like stagecraft to make it look more impressive. And also, they used it as an example that obviously Warner are pretty much broke right now. So I saw some YouTubers that were pretty proud to mention how they were by themselves, able to do something much better than a studio with a huge staff, a whole crew, and billions of dollars at their disposals. So yeah, I suppose it did look kind of cheap from that point of view. So I don't think it really mattered. The important thing was to get the information out, to let people know about the upcoming slate. But I guess this being such an important announcement, it would have been great for them to do a great first impression with this announcement, with this video. So I guess depending on where you stand, maybe you agree that it does look cheap and maybe James Gunn could have some better showmanship, or maybe you stand with we got the information we wanted, the rest doesn't really matter, you decide. I will talk about it in the same order that James Gunn did present it, otherwise it gets a bit too confusing. Also, I will break my one rule. I will use images in order to be able to talk about the projects that James Gunn was talking about. It'll make it a bit easier to talk about those projects and for you guys to visually see what I'm talking about. So James Gunn started talking about the Creature Commandos, although this is probably the one time where I will agree with some of the people who were not too happy, is that he should have started with Superman. And basically the whole new DC universe will be built on top of Superman. So he's going to be the most important character, and the first Superman movie will be the most important project. So he should have started with that and then went on to more obscure characters. I decided not to do that. Because at the end of the day, if they do release the first Superman movie and it's a stinker, it might kill the whole operation. It's a mistake that we saw a lot of studios make in the past. Basically, ever since we got the MCU, every studio has wanted to have their own MCU. And we saw studios like Universal. Universal should have been in a great position to have their own shared cinematic universe. They had the Monster Universe, and way back when, technically they already had a shared cinematic universe way back when, with the Wolfman, Dracula, the Mummy, Frankenstein, and all those characters. And even then, when the time came to have their own shared cinematic universe, they failed epically. They tried the first time to launch the universe with their Dracula movie, and the movie was a failure. It could have been a good movie, it had some potential, and basically it was what if Dracula was Batman or something like that. And it was kind of cool. There was some cool visuals, there was some cool ideas, but at the end of the day, the execution didn't really work, and at the end of the day, it was not successful with the audience. The audience did not respond to their version of Dracula. Maybe the audience still had the Dracula from Francis Coppola in mind. Basically, they tried to make Dracula as a superhero, but for Dracula fans, Dracula is not a superhero. Dracula should be a horror film. And instead of making it a horror film, they tried to make it a superhero film, and the audience did not respond to it. And then they tried again with The Mummy, with Tom Cruise, and that also was a failure. One of the problems is that one of the mistakes they made, and it's the mistake that pretty much all the studios are making right now, before they have one successful movie, they already plan the 12th movie. Like, they did not even know if The Mummy would be successful or not, and already they were planning an Invisible Man movie, a Jekyll and Hyde movie, and probably others I failed to mention. It's okay to try to plan ahead, but before they launch into a whole cinematic universe, they need a successful movie first. They need a successful movie to begin with. Heck, DC already made that mistake themselves. When they had Man of Steel, they decided to build their whole cinematic universe on Man of Steel, and it was a mistake. Basically, they built a whole cinematic universe on failure. Yeah, it's a bit rough to call a Man of Steel a failure, but it wasn't a success by any stretch of the imagination. Financially, it wasn't a failure, but it wasn't a huge success either. And to build their whole cinematic universe on that one movie, they needed it to be a huge success. They needed to build their cinematic universe on a strong foundation of success. And they did not have that with Man of Steel. And critically speaking, it divided the audience. Yeah, the Zack Snyder fans loved Man of Steel, but the classical DC fans hated Man of Steel. So that movie did two things. It wasn't hugely successful financially speaking, and it divided the audience. And to this day, DC is still hurt by that because the DC audience is clearly split now. There's the Zack Snyder fans, and there's the DC fans, and there might even be like a third section of fans, which would be the Injustice fans, but that would be another discussion. So that is part why the Marvel Universe was such a success, is that they built on success. The first Iron Man movie was successful financially, but even better yet, it was a critical success. And I don't mean a success with the critics. I mean a critical success with the audience. The audience loved the movie, and even more, the audience loved Robert Downey Jr. as Tony Stark. So basically, Iron Man, and even more, Robert Downey Jr. became the foundation stone of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and from there they were able to build up from success to success to success, and end up with the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Heck, at the time they released Iron Man, they also released the Incredible Hulk movie. So they had basically two chances to start their cinematic universe. If somehow Iron Man would not have been so successful, maybe the Hulk would have been more successful and they could have built their cinematic universe on the Hulk. But ultimately, at the end of the day, Iron Man was successful, so they chose to build their universe on Iron Man. And also, with the Hulk, it was a bit more complicated because Universal had distribution rights for the Hulk. So luckily for Marvel, Iron Man was the successful movie, the most successful movie of the two, so they were able to build their cinematic universe on top of Iron Man. And to this day, they did not make another Hulk movie because they don't want to share the money with Universal. It's pretty much that simple. They did find ways to use the Hulk so that they wouldn't have to be distributed by Universal, and then they wouldn't have to pay Universal. So we got the Hulk in the Avengers, we got the Hulk in Thor Ragnarok. So they found ways to still use the Hulk without having an official Hulk movie so that Universal would not benefit from that. So Iron Man was a success for Marvel, and they built the Marvel Cinematic Universe on top of Iron Man, so they were able to build their cinematic universe on a strong foundation. Ironically enough, nowadays they're making a lot of mistakes that the other studios have made, but that's another story. So for DC to start with some obscure characters, it's kind of weird because they don't have a successful movie just yet. They don't even know if their Superman movie will be successful or not. I remember when they wanted to start the DC Universe with the Green Lantern movie, and the Green Lantern movie not only was such an epic failure that it killed the DC Cinematic Universe at the time, but it also killed the Green Lantern comics. Heck, it even killed the Green Lantern animated series. The Green Lantern animated series was pretty good, it was fairly popular, it had good ratings, but it couldn't sell a single toy. The reason for that is quite simple. There was such a hype around the Green Lantern movie at the time that retailers ordered a whole bunch of Green Lantern materials, a whole bunch of Green Lantern toys, and sadly the movie being a failure, they couldn't get rid of those toys. They couldn't sell those toys. So when the time came to purchase some Green Lantern toys for the animated series, they didn't purchase any toys. So the failure of the movie also killed the animated series, and it did hurt the comic also as well. At the time, I would argue that basically the Trinity at DC at the time was Batman, Superman, and Green Lantern. Green Lantern was one of their most popular characters at the time. Green Lantern Rebirth was successful. It successfully brought back Hal Jordan, but then they were able to build from success to success. The Sinestro Corps War was even more successful, and Blackest Night was even more successful. Sadly, the failure of the Green Lantern movie pretty much killed all of that. After the movie, the comics went down the drain. It's sad, but what can you do? So it's okay to have obscure characters, like I'm sure a lot of people will use the Guardians of the Galaxy as an example of that. But before they made the Guardians of the Galaxy movie, they had made the Iron Man movie. They had made the Avengers movie, which is pretty much what brought the Marvel Universe to the level it is right now. So they already had quite a few successful movies behind them when they made the Guardians of the Galaxy movie. And also, the Guardians of the Galaxy movie had a successful comic run in the 2000s. They also had one in the late 90s, but the version we saw in the movies was pretty much based around the version from the 2000s. So not only did they build on top of the success of the Iron Man and Avengers movie, they also built on the success of the Guardians of the Galaxy comics we had not that long ago. So that movie, even though it was using obscure characters, was built on success. Which, ironically enough, is a lesson that Marvel seems to have forgotten, because now they're trying to build characters, to build series around characters that never were successful in the comics whatsoever. What can you do? So seeing James Gunn trying to launch projects with the Creature Commandos, and especially also seeing him start his presentation with those weird characters, that was to be expected because that is kind of the wheelhouse that James Gunn likes to play into. We saw that also in the Suicide Squad, even the Peacemaker. Like we saw James Gunn likes to use obscure characters and weird characters, and Creature Commandos fits in that perfectly. The only thing is that we don't even know if their universe will be successful just yet. Their universe will be built on their new Superman. But what if that new Superman is a failure? What happens to the Creature Commandos then? Or better yet, what happens to the new DC Studios? Because everything will be built on Superman. And if Superman is not successful, the whole thing could fall apart. So starting the presentation with the Creature Commando was a bit of a mistake, I think. This whole enterprise will be built on top of Superman, so he should have introduced us to his new Superman and basically convinced us why his new Superman would be awesome and why it made sense to build the whole new DC universe on top of this new Superman. But we'll talk about Superman a bit later. So he started with the Creature Commandos, which includes the Weasel, which is a character that was played by his brother in the Suicide Squad, which brings me, I guess, to another point when it comes to James Gunn. Nepotism. James Gunn seems to like very much to use basically his family members and his friends in his movies. We saw that with his brother. I think his brother is in most, if not all, of his movies. But we saw that also there's Michael Rooker that he keeps on reusing. And also, from what we understand, James Gunn is going to bring pretty much the entire cast of Guardians of the Galaxy in his new DC Universe venture. Already there's rumors that Chris Pratt will be playing Booster Gold. We'll talk about that a bit more later. There's also Dave Bautista who wanted to play Bane, and he was told that that would not be the case. And also Dave Bautista mentioned that they were pretty much rebooting the whole DC universe. They were pretty much rebooting everything, which is not really true at all. We'll see that a bit more when we talk about the next project. So it would seem that James Gunn favors using his friends and family members, like he used his wife in Suicide Squad, but also in the Peacemaker TV series. And as already mentioned, he uses his brother in various projects. And he does have a tendency to use his friends as well, which makes a lot of people a bit unhappy because basically people are very, let's say, angry at James Gunn right now because he's not going to use Henry Cavill as Superman. Basically, he's effectively fired Henry Cavill. But even worse, to pour salt on the wound, he is going to keep on using Ezra Miller as the Flash, or so it would seem. So right now, the Henry Cavill fans are furious to see that Henry Cavill was let go, and Ezra Miller will stick around. Now, I won't get into the whole drama behind those actors. I don't really care about that. And yes, any way you slice it, it does seem a bit unfair. Sadly, I have some bad news. Bad news. Life isn't fair. What can you do? I saw some people even go as far as to suggest that when you look at the Peacemaker TV show, and the last episode we do see an appearance from the Justice League, and in the final scene we do see Ezra Miller as the Flash, we do see Jason Momoa as the Aquaman, but for Superman, Batman, and Wonder Woman, we only see them in silhouette. We don't really see the actors because Gal Gadot, Ben Affleck, or Henry Cavill were not used. The only one who truly came back for the scene is Ezra Miller and Jason Momoa. And some use that as an example that is why Jason Momoa will still be part of the new DC Universe. Ezra Miller will still be part of the DC Universe because they are buddies with James Gunn, as opposed to Henry Cavill, Ben Affleck, and Gal Gadot. Is there any truth to that? I don't really know. But it does make some kind of sense. But it does make it seem like if you are buddies with James Gunn, there will be a place for you in the DC Universe. And it brings us to the next project he mentions, Amanda Waller. I have no idea why they're doing this project. Well, I have some ideas, but no one, no one was asking for an Amanda Waller project. Now, I like Amanda Waller. I think she's a great character. I liked her in the Suicide Squad comic way back when, in the Legends comic, in the Invasion comic, in the Justice League animated series. She was awesome. As a character, she's awesome, but not to lead her own series. What's an Amanda Waller series going to be about? Now, she's a behind the scene operator, not really operator, administrator. She's the one pulling the strings in the background. So what are they gonna do? We're gonna see her in her office, and she's going to manipulate the Suicide Squad members to do things they don't want to do? Or are they going to do some slice of life stories where we see her on a Tuesday night doing laundry or something? They did establish she has a daughter in the Peacemaker TV show, so I wouldn't be surprised if the show involves her daughter in some ways. But I don't think there's anyone who ever thought that Amanda Waller could lead her own series. And you have to wonder what the Amanda Waller series will be about. Although seeing the images that James Gunn posted, it kind of sort of suggests maybe she'll be on the run from the law. Will someone frame her and then she'll have to run and try to prove her innocence or something? Although we do know that she's not innocent, so maybe whatever crime she did in the past will catch up to her and she'll have to run from the law. I guess we're gonna have to wait and see to find out. Now, Viola Davis is a fine actress. I'm sure she'll play the role fine, but I just don't think an Amanda Waller series is really a good idea. But I could be wrong. And next, he talks a bit about Superman. Basically, we are going to go back to a younger Superman when he starts working at the Daily Planet. Supposedly, that we're not going to see the origin of Superman again. They're not going to go back all the way back to his origin. Sadly, I also believe their pants are on fire. And we were told it was going to be a complete reboot. They're going to reboot everything. And we know that Jason Momoa will still be around. Ezra Miller will still be around. Pretty much the whole cast from the Suicide Squad will still be around. So sadly, I have to take what is being said with a huge grain of salt. From what I understand, is Superman will be a mixture of All-Star Superman and the New 52 Superman. Not too crazy to see the New 52 Superman being included in there, because again, they have to build on success, and the New 52 Superman was not successful. There's a reason why by the time we got to Rebirth, they got rid of the New 52 Superman and replaced him with the classic Superman. So seeing him trying to keep sort of the New 52 Superman around, even in a roundabout ways, I'm not too crazy about that. For All-Star Superman, a lot of people sees that series as the definitive Superman series. So yeah, it does make some kind of sense to build on that story. Hopefully, he will build it more on All-Star Superman and not so much on the New 52 Superman. At this point, we don't have enough information to know for sure. Which I guess is a little part of the problem for this presentation. The whole DC universe will be built on Superman, on this Superman, and on the first movie with this character. And we barely know anything about it. Now, it could be that for some reason they don't want to share their plans, or it could be that they don't know just yet, which would be a huge problem. If they don't know just yet what they're going to do with their new Superman, the direction they're going to take, it is the foundation upon which everything will be built. So before they start building anything else, the foundation should already be built. It should already be very solid, very secure, and then you build on top of that. And sadly, this kind of indicates that odds are they are building on shaky foundations, on unfinished foundations, and that is very worrisome because they're pretty much repeating the mistakes that not only they already did, but that others already did as well. There's two ways you can learn from mistakes. You can learn from your own mistakes, or you can learn from mistakes that others already made. And in this case, we have both, and somehow they don't seem to have learned from that. I hope I'm wrong. I guess we're gonna have to wait and see for that. So hopefully they are going to be able to tell us more about this new Superman soon, and more importantly, they are going to be able to tell us who they are going to cast in the role. The person cast in the role of Superman will be pretty important. They will need someone with a lot of charisma, And if he can be a good actor, that probably wouldn't hurt either. And next we have lanterns. Not green lanterns, just lanterns. Does that mean that we will have not just the green lanterns, but the evil red lanterns, or even better yet, the evil black lanterns? We're gonna have to wait and see for that. Basically, it seems that that series will be Hal Jordan and Jon Stewart together, and it will be some sort of a body cop TV show. The disappointing part is that it will happen on Earth, from what he told us. If there's one project that should be cosmic, that should be happening in space, it is the Green Lantern TV show. And you would think that this would be a perfect project, seeing the background that James Gunn has. James Gunn's with the Guardian of the Galaxy pretty much established the cosmic side of the Marvel Universe. So you would think that he would use that for the Green Lanterns. But no, it would seem that the Green Lantern TV show will be on Earth. I understand that it's probably one way for them to keep the budget down, which is probably a concern they have also with a lot of those shows, is that they have to try to find ways to make TV shows that will cost next to nothing to produce. Ironically enough, they do have a successful model they could follow, the Arrowverse. The Arrowverse were able to make some pretty good TV shows on a shoestring budget. Yes, the quality of the TV shows went down the drain after a few seasons, but the early seasons of Arrow and the early seasons of The Flash were pretty awesome, and you could tell that they did those shows with a handful of quarters. They barely had any budgets when they made those, and they were able to make some pretty good content. Yeah, there was too much teen drama in those TV shows, but that is the audience that the CW was after. And speaking of the CW and the Arrow TV show, sadly one of the teases we had way back when was that John Diggle would actually become Jon Stewart and that he would become a Green Lantern. They even end the Arrow series with a scene where John Diggle does found the Green Lantern ring. So we were hoping against hope that it would lead to a somewhat future Green Lantern TV show with Diggles, and sadly it seems that will not happen. I guess James Gunn could decide to use Diggles to play Jon Stewart in his new TV show. Sadly, I think he will probably want to distance himself from the CW TV shows, so I kinda doubt he will use any of the CW actors. But I could be wrong. It would be awesome to see Diggles play Jon Stewart in that Lanterns TV show. I guess we're gonna have to wait and see for that. And we've been hearing about that Lantern TV show for a long time. Basically, way back when, we would hear that it would be a body cop movie with Jon Stewart and Hal Jordan. And then later on, it became a whole mess of other things. And it would seem that they're back to their original plans of making it a body cop movie with Hal Jordan and Jon Stewart. Classic Lantern fans are pretty much Hal Jordan fans, so that should make at least some of them happy. And Jon Stewart fans are pretty much fans from Jon Stewart from Green Lantern, thanks to the Justice League TV show. That should make those fans happy. I guess we're gonna have to wait and see. Hopefully, the failure of the Green Lantern movie is far enough in the past that it will not hurt this TV show too much. I guess we're gonna have to wait and see. Personally, I had fun with the Green Lantern movie, but I'm very much alone in my corner. Pretty much everyone hated that film. I thought it was kind of fun, especially seeing how Al Jordan did enjoy using his powers in a few of the scenes. When he sort of learned to fly from Tomorrow Ray, seeing how he's so happy to fly with his ring, that was a fun scene for me. Sadly, yeah, there's quite a few mistakes in that film. Parallax being a huge cloud. Again, you would think they would have learned from the mistakes from Fantastic Four. One of the mistakes the Fantastic Four movie did was to make Galactus a huge cloud. A villain that's a huge cloud, not a good idea. And you would think that they would have learned from that, but no, they had to repeat that mistake again, and it was a disaster. And next we have the Authority. I have to admit, I was very much surprised by this because DC hasn't done anything with the Authority in quite a while. Although not too long ago they had a series, Superman and the Authority, but it had been quite some time before we even saw the Authority in the DC Universe. So it was quite a surprise to see James Gunn says that he wants to make an Authority movie. I saw some people mention that basically the game plan is that they want to make Superman versus the Elite, but seeing how now they own the Authority, like the Elite was pretty much DC's version of the Authority, but here DC now actually owns the Authority. So there's no reason to use some pastiche characters. They can use the actual characters. So some people seems to think that their game plan is to make Superman versus the Elite. Although I've seen other people who says that James Gunn plans to make the Kingdom Come movie, and instead of using a whole bunch of generic heroes, he would use the Authority to fight Superman. So is it going to be Kingdom Come with Superman versus the Authority? Is it going to be Superman versus the Elite, but with the Authority instead of the Elite? We don't really know at this point. I have mixed feelings about this because I mentioned previously that basically you want to build on success, and the Authority did have a successful comic book run, and it is also basically the template that was later on used to make the Ultimates at Marvel Comics. But the Authority did have a successful comic, but way back in the 90s. So it's been a while since they had any measure of success. To give a bit of background, basically there was this series created by Jim Lee. When Jim Lee left Marvel and created Image, he created a couple of series. He created Wildcats, but he also created a series called Stormwatch. Stormwatch was not very successful. It was sort of critically acclaimed a bit, but not really successful. So they pretty much relaunched it as the Authority. And I remember scratching my head way back when, because basically they had the same creative team. They had mostly the same characters. Although a bunch of the Stormwatch characters were killed in the Stormwatch Aliens crossover. But then the remaining Stormwatch characters were used to create the Authority with a few new characters. Also, there's Midnighter and Apollo. They were not really members of Stormwatch, but they were introduced in the pages of Stormwatch and then became members of the Authority. And lately, we see DC obsessed with trying to turn Superman gay, trying to turn Batman gay. But way back when, Midnighter was pretty much gay Batman, and Apollo was gay Superman. And that was way back in the 90s. So DC already had a gay Superman that somehow they're not using, but they want to basically turn Superman gay. And the same with Batman. They're working really hard to turn Batman gay, but they already have gay Batman. It is Midnighter. So instead of trying to change the characters that are already there, why not use the characters they already have? They already have a gay Batman. They already have a gay Superman. But instead of using those characters, they want to change the classic characters. They've had Midnighter and Apollo for quite some time, but somehow they're not using them. It's crazy, but what can you do? So it would seem that James Gunn decided to use the Authority. I have to wonder if he does mention that he was a big fan of the series, which I guess could be true, but I have to wonder also if he's not trying to maybe appease Jim Lee a bit. Basically, Jim Lee created the Wildstorm universe and those characters, so he will benefit directly from those characters being involved in movies. So we talked a bit about nepotism, and also in some videos also I mentioned, I talked about how very often decisions are based not really on what's good for the property, but on personal self-interest, or in this case on the self-interest of your buddies. Now, did James Gunn make a buddy-buddy with Jim Lee, and knowing that Jim Lee would directly benefit from the Authority becoming a movie, he's looking out for the self-interest of his buddy. Again, we see it happen with the movies all the time, where he uses his friends in his movies, or even his brother. So you have to wonder if that's one more example of that. I guess we'll never really know. And the Authority is pretty much an edgier version of the Justice League. And way back when, it may have seemed edgy and fresh, but since then we got a lot of examples from that. We got the Justice Lords, we got the Injustice, we got the Boys. So we do run the risk of the Authority from suffering from the John Carter syndrome. Basically, when they made the movie John Carter of Mars, or in the end they just called it John Carter. John Carter was very influential. It's an old novel from the late 1800s, and it is what pretty much influenced Flash Gordon. It influenced Star Wars. It influenced pretty much everything that followed. It influenced Superman. Sadly, even though John Carter came first, the fact that his movie came in so late, a lot of people didn't like it because they thought they were copying Star Wars. They thought they were copying Superman, which is the other way around, but sadly most people didn't know that. So I have to wonder if the Authority will run into the same problem. I guess we're going to have to wait and see for that. And next we have Wonder Woman Paradise Lost. I guess I can sort of understand why they would go. Basically, they're going way back in the past history of Themyscira. I understand why they might want to go there as opposed to telling the Wonder Woman origin story one more time, because we did get that already not too long ago in the movies. So getting the Wonder Woman origin again would be very, very redundant. Not to mention that we did get the origin a couple of times in animated movies. So yeah, telling the Wonder Woman origin story one more time probably wouldn't work. I can understand them going back way back when, and from the description that James Gunn gives us, it's going to be sort of like a Game of Thrones. Like does he mean that in the sense that there's going to be a lot of violence, there's going to be a lot of sex and nudity, there's going to be a lot of political intrigue? We don't know at this point. So I can understand him trying not to repeat the Wonder Woman origin story one more time to introduce his Wonder Woman character. But you have to wonder, who really cares about the history of the Amazons? Like when people saw the first Wonder Woman movie or even the Justice League movie and they saw all those Amazons in that movie, I haven't seen anyone who said, oh, I wonder what the history of those characters is. No one cares about them. But I guess until we know more about this project, we're gonna have to wait and see. And next we have The Brave and the Bold, which will introduce their new Batman and their new Robin. It seems a bit weird to a classic fan like me, because Brave and the Bold was pretty much a team-up book. It was Batman teamed up with someone else. Although there's a few times where it wasn't even Batman, there was someone else teamed up with someone else. But usually it was Batman teamed up with someone else. And that is also what we got from the Brave and the Bold animated series. But here it seems it is the title they will use for a Batman and Robin movie. Now, I can understand them not wanting to use Batman and Robin for their movie. The last movie that was titled Batman and Robin was a disaster. So I can understand them not wanting to use the Batman and Robin name. Although, I have to wonder if they could not use a better title than Brave and the Bold. Also, Brave and the Bold could have been a great TV show on HBO Max. It could have been a great team-up show with Batman teaming up with some obscure DC characters, and then it could be used to introduce those obscure characters to a broad audience. And heck, if for some reason they don't want to use Batman, because sadly they don't want to use Batman on TV shows for some reasons, but basically it could have been a team-up book then introducing two new characters to the DC universe. Oh well. And for Robin, they decided to jump straight to Damian Wayne. Sadly, it is a mistake that Marvel also made. They are in such a hurry to start telling some of the more modern stories that they skip over a whole bunch of stories they could tell in the meantime. So they skipped over Dick Grayson being Robin, and then later on becoming Nightwing. They skip over Jason Todd being killed by the evil Joker, and then becoming the Red Hood. They skip over Tim Drake. Okay, with Tim Drake, I can see their point. But basically they skipped a whole bunch of potential stories to go straight to the story with Damian Wayne as the son of Batman. Sadly, if you jump straight to Damian Wayne, and there's a lot of context lacking. Like the reason why Damian Wayne was such an interesting character is how he contrasted with the previous Robins that came before him. But if we never saw those Robins, that means if we start straight with Damian Wayne, we're not going to see the contrast between him and all the previous Robins. I'm sure we will see a Nightwing eventually. I'm sure we will see Red Hood eventually. And sadly, a lot of the interesting stories with Nightwing and Red Hood will have happened off screens. I'm sure there'll be some sort of flashback explaining that, oh, Robin, Dick Grayson was the first Robin and he became Nightwing eventually. If we only get that story through flashback, or even worse, through dialogue and everything happens off screen, it's a lot of potential stories that they could have told that they're throwing down the drain. So it doesn't seem to be a good idea to me to jump straight to Damian Wayne. Although, full disclosure, I'm not really a fan of Damian Wayne. I don't hate the character, but I don't like it very much either. So maybe I'm a bit biased on that front. Maybe if you're a huge Damian Wayne fan, you're very happy with that news. And another thing also is that it means that we will have an older Batman. It's a bit strange because they got rid of Ben Affleck because he was too old to play Batman. But it would seem that they are still going to go for an older Batman. From what I understand, the game plan was supposed to be to try to get the Batman and Superman at the same age for some reason. But if Batman already has a son, odds are he's going to be in his at least early 30s, maybe late 30s, as opposed to Superman, who's supposed to be a young Superman. So young Superman will be what, in his early 20s, late 20s maybe? Sadly, without some more information, it's kind of hard to make sense of all of this. Although it does confirm that we will get a new Batman for this new DC universe. At some point, some people were speculating that Robert Pattinson would become the Batman from the DC universe. That's not going to be the case. We will get a new Batman for the DC universe, and the Robert Pattinson Batman will continue, but it will be treated as an Elseworld. Remember earlier when I mentioned that their pants are on fire? I remember some time ago it was mentioned that there would not be four Batman. A lot of people saw that as meaning that the new DC Universe Batman would be the only Batman, or Robert Pattinson would be the only new Batman, the only Batman, and it would also be the Batman for the DC Universe. Turns out that no, there's not going to be four Batman, but it doesn't mean that there's going to be only one Batman either. And again, it did imply that there would be only one Batman, the way it was said way back when. But I guess their pants were at least a little bit on fire because we're going to get more than one Batman. We're going to get the Robert Pattinson Batman. We're going to get this new Batman from the DC universe, this new DC universe, and there's also the Joker movie that's getting a sequel. So yeah, technically, I guess that is correct. There's not going to be four Batman. There's going to be three of them. Sadly, that is why I mentioned that sometimes their pants are on fire. And sadly, even if they think they're telling the truth, sometimes in the long run, we find out that what they were saying was not entirely accurate. Heck, we saw a perfect example of that not too long ago, when they announced that Henry Cavill would be the Superman for the DC Universe, only then to be told that he's not going to be Superman after all. One lesson I've learned way back when, working for various studios, is that until you actually see the project on the big screen or on the TV screen, anything can happen. Heck, we have Batgirl, which would be a great example of that. The film was shot, they had to go to post-production and then distribution and then of course marketing. So even though they did spend a lot of money to shoot the movie, they still had a lot of money left to spend on the movie for post-production, for advertising. Distribution also does cost money. And somehow someone decided that all that money, it wasn't worth to invest all that money for that film. Apparently it was unreleasable, as they says. So that is a great example that until you actually see the project on the big screen or on the small screen, you never know what's going to happen. Anything could derail the project and cancel it at any time. So sadly, sometimes things change, and something that might have been true at one point ends up being not so true, which is why even if they think they're telling the truth, odds are there might be something down the road that will change and that will make whatever statement they made not so true anymore. So they did make a statement saying that there would not be four Batman, and again, technically, that is the truth. There might be only three. But again, at the time, it pretty much implied that there would be only one Batman, which sadly we now know is not true. Now, there could be that there was some contractual obligations that they had to respect. Maybe they already had the contracts with Robert Pattinson, with Matt Reeves, and they had to make a sequel to the Batman. We don't really know. And maybe someday, far in the future, Robert Pattinson will write a book and it will explain what happened behind the scenes. Until then, we don't really know what happened. So now it would seem we will get a new Batman and Robin movie. Now all we can do is wait and see who they're going to cast as Batman and who they're going to cast as Robin. And I'm curious if Robin will be a 12-year-old like he is in the comics. They might be tempted to make him older like they did in Batman and Robin. They went with Chris O'Donnell, which was 20-something at the time, which was a bit weird because it did seem to be worried about social services or something like that. Although the actor was 20-something, maybe the character was supposed to be younger. But if that's the case, it really didn't work in that context. I hope they do go for a 12-year-old, and I can already hear a lot of people already complain that, oh, a 12-year-old Robin would be stupid. I have two words for you. Hit girl. In the movie Kick-Ass, we have a hit girl who's pretty much the Robin for Big Daddy, and she was a 12-year-old girl, and it was awesome. So hopefully they will follow that template for Robin, and hopefully they will be able to find a kid actor who can actually act. Sadly, a kid actor who are actually good is a pretty rare thing. With Kick-Ass and Hit Girl, the Kick-Ass producers were uber lucky to find Chloe Grace Moretz, Hopefully, James Gunn will be able to find a great kid to play Robin. I guess we're gonna have to wait and see for that. And next, we have Booster Gold. Basically, James Gunn mentions that it's going to be like a superhero with the imposter syndrome complex. Basically, Booster Gold is going to be a loser from the future, comes back into the past, he tries to be a superhero using future technology, and somehow that will be used to explore the imposter complex somehow. So at some point we had rumors that pretty much the entire cast of Guardians of the Galaxy were coming over to the DC Universe. And in the case of Chris Pratt, at some point people thought that maybe he would be playing Hal Jordan. Other people thought that maybe he would be playing Booster Gold. And now seeing that there is this announcement about Booster Gold, pretty much everyone seems to agree that Chris Pratt would be perfect for Booster Gold. So it would be tempting to believe those rumors and to think that Booster Gold would be Chris Pratt, but at this point we don't really know. For all we know, Chris Pratt is going to play Ambush Bug. We don't know at this point. My first exposure to Booster Gold was within the pages of Action Comics. Basically, this comic literally changed my life. I had pretty much given up reading comics. Basically, I had reached a point where I thought, okay, I'm too old to still be reading comics. So I stopped reading comics for a couple of years. And then one night when I was coming back home, I saw a spinner rack and I saw the cover that you're seeing right now. I was hit with a jackhammer. This comic literally changed my life. I got back into comics thanks to this comic. And after that, worlds would live, worlds would die, and things would never be the same. Basically, this brought me back into comics. I went back into the comic store and bought a whole bunch of back issues by John Byrne, Superman back issues, and Action Comics back issues. And then I got Crisis on Infinite Earths, which I had missed because I was not reading comics anymore, and life was good. So I got a bit of a bias when it comes to Booster Gold, and then of course later on we got the Booster Gold in the Justice League International comic, where we got the Blue and the Gold, where Booster Gold and Blue Beetle pretty much became the best of buddies. Sadly, that ended with Infinite Crisis, when the evil Maxwell Lord shot Ted Kord Blue Beetle, but that is a story for another time. So at this point, we don't know a lot about the series, but Booster Gold does come from the future. Also, there was a Booster Gold series at some point where there was a lot of time travel shenanigan. It even allowed us to be able to see Booster Gold with his friend Blue Beetle one more time because of a time travel thingy. Basically, Booster Gold decides to go back in time, save his friend Ted Kord, and of course, he ends up breaking the timeline, and then he has to go back and undo that. But they did give us some storylines where Booster Gold was doing some time travel shenanigans. So they might do that with the TV show, and it would allow us to be able to explore various eras of the DC Universe, but also, again, be able to showcase various obscure characters. I guess we're going to have to wait and see for that. And next, he does mention a Supergirl movie, which is pretty much a huge surprise for pretty much everyone. Again, you would think that they would want to have a successful Superman movie first, and then maybe thinking about branching out into other characters like Supergirl. But once more, they have to put the cart in front of the horses, and they have to try to rush into things. Again, they probably thought that, oh, we have too many series with evil male characters, so we need some more series with female characters. Sadly, one of the concerns that we seems to be seeing in all those projects is checking boxes. Sadly, James Gunn seems to be very concerned with checking boxes, which is not something new. He's been doing that before. If you look at Peacemaker, he did check a lot of boxes with that, but even way back when with Guardians of the Galaxy, he was already checking a lot of boxes way back when. Sadly, there's a phenomenon in Hollywood and in TV and even in comics. They're no longer into the entertainment business. They're into the checking boxes business, checking to make sure that, oh, okay, let's check to make sure we have enough female, let's check to make sure we have enough diversity. And at this point, it's obvious it's not going to change. Hollywood are doing that, whether it's in movies and TV shows, comics are doing that, video games are doing that. So at this point, pretty much everyone is doing that. Heck, DC Universe Online is doing that. But also, it seems they're going to use a Supergirl story based on a story by Tom King. Tom King seems to be, let's say, one of the very influential people at DC right now. He seems to be one of their top writers. I mentioned about trying to make decisions based on self-interest, or in this case, the self-interest of possibly buddies or people who have some influence, and that seems to be an example of that. The only reason to use this storyline seems to be to please Tom King somehow, because no one really was talking about that storyline. Doesn't seem to be especially popular, doesn't seem to have sold all that well. I mentioned again about building on success, and this is not it. This is not a successful storyline. And again, the only real reason I can see that this storyline would be used is to please Tom King somehow. I'm not sure what level of influence he has at DC Comics or at Warner in general, but it seems to be enough that they decided to make a Supergirl movie based on his comic. Now, I could be wrong. It could simply be that James Gunn is a huge fan of that story somehow and decided to put it into film. But again, that is not building on success. I wouldn't go as far as to say it's building on failure, because I'm not sure if that comic was a failure or not, but it certainly wasn't a success because no one is talking about it. Or I should say, no one was talking about it until they saw that it would be the basis for the Supergirl movie, and everyone, pretty much everyone, is scratching their heads, wondering why, oh why did they pick up that comic as the basis for the Supergirl movie. At this point, only James Gunn knows, and the Shadow, of course. And last but not least, it would seem that we will get a Swamp Thing project. I forget if it's going to be a movie or a TV show. I think it's going to be a movie, but I have to admit, completely forget. I guess I could see a cool horror movie being made with that character. Although odds are the only reason why they're really wanting to make a Swamp Thing movie is because of Alan Moore. I'm pretty sure, seeing James Gunn's age, I'm pretty sure he's probably a huge fan of Alan Moore. Also seeing the weird, quirky things that James Gunn seems to like. Yeah, I would say it's probably a safe bet to say that he's probably a huge Alan Moore fan. So my guess is that he's probably going to try to put the Alan Moore Swamp Thing on the big screen. Full disclosure, not really a fan of Alan Moore's Swamp Thing. The story was fine. I read it way back when. There's a couple of issues I kind of liked, but overall, I always thought it was too pretentious for my taste. But it seems to have struck a chord with the audience, and a lot of people see his Swamp Thing as a masterpiece. So it's very easy to see why James Gunn would like to make a Swamp Thing movie based on Alan Moore's work, despite the recent Swamp Thing TV show that wasn't very much a hit from what I understand. Again, it comes down to building on success or building on failure. In this case, it's a little bit of both. The recent TV show wasn't really a success. I haven't seen the show, so I'm not sure if I would call it a failure, because I have to admit, I did not watch the show at all. Maybe it is a great show, and some outside forces made it not so successful. I have no idea at this point. Although if it had been successful, it would not have been cancelled. So we have the recent TV show not successful, but we do have the Alan Moore run that was highly acclaimed, highly successful, and again that is seen as a masterpiece. So on one hand, he does build on success if he does build it with the Alan Moore Swamp Thing in mind. But it does have the stink of failure a bit because of the recent Swamp Thing TV show. Although by the time they're done making the movie, basically the Superman movie will be released sometimes in 2025. I think they mentioned July 2025. So odds are Swamp Thing will be after that. So in 2, 3, 5 years, once we do get the Swamp Thing movie, odds are most people will have forgotten about the Swamp Thing TV show. So ideally, if he could simply keep the success of the Alan Moore in people's mind and have them forget the failure of the TV show, it might help at least a little bit. So there we go about the DC Universe Slate that was announced by James Gunn just yesterday. Dang, it's gonna be a long video. I probably should have broken it down into a series of videos, maybe next time. So in a nutshell, if you are a fan of James Gunn, if you are a fan of the Suicide Squad, odds are you will be happy with this new DC Universe. Full disclosure, I'm not really a fan of James Gunn. I did enjoy his Guardians of the Galaxy, the first one and the second one, but I wouldn't call myself a fan of James Gunn. If I'm a fan of anything, I am a fan of his Guardians of the Galaxy, but I wouldn't say I'm a fan of James Gunn. And I'm not really a fan of the Suicide Squad, and I'm really not a fan of Peacemaker. So when it was announced that James Gunn would be basically the Kevin Feige of the DC Universe, I was a bit worried, and sadly with this announcement, I am still a bit worried. I'm a bit worried that this new DC universe might be built on a foundation of failure once more. Whether you do like the Suicide Squad or not, we can't really call it a success. It was a bit of a critical success, I guess, with some of the fans or some of the critics, but overall, it didn't make a lot of money. So the idea of having pretty much a gunverse for the DC universe after the not so successful The Suicide Squad, that is a bit worrisome. I'm sure some people would mention that the Peacemaker was a huge success. I'm not so sure about that. Whenever they declare a huge success of something that is on a streaming service, sadly with streaming services, we don't have the numbers. Or we do have whatever numbers the studio decides to share with us, which often is either misleading at best or flat out dishonest and not true at all. The second season of Peacemaker has been pushed back, as supposedly it is because James Gunn is too busy basically planning the next 10 years of the new DC universe. So maybe that is true, or maybe Peacemaker was not as successful as we were led to believe, so they're pushing it back for that reason. There's no way to really know at this point. Again, as I mentioned, sometimes we have to take what they're saying with a huge grain of salt. So maybe it is true that James Gunn is so busy right now writing a whole bunch of stuff that he does not have time to make a Peacemaker 2. But again, if it was really that successful, you would have thought that they would have put the priority on that. Oh well. We saw a similar example with Marvel. Apparently Captain Marvel was a huge success. And it was such a success that we've been waiting and waiting for Captain Marvel's 2. And by the time they decided to go around and actually make Captain Marvel's 2, it was no longer Captain Marvel's 2, it was the Marvels. So the movie was so successful that the main character was downgraded in her own movie. It's kind of hard not to wonder about that. So there we go. So we got the DC Universe announcement by James Gunn by the end of January as he promised. Yes, he waited until the very last day of January, but he still did make the announcement in January. So in this case, his pants were not on fire. So what about you guys? What do you think of this new DC Universe announcement? Is there any projects in there that you are excited about? Is there some projects that you are worried about? Let us know in the comment section down below. And let us start speculating about the brand new DC Universe. I will probably try to make a follow-up video based on your comments, but also there's a few things I wanted to talk about, and this video is way too long already. I wanted to talk about the impact it may have on DC Universe Online itself, but that's gonna have to be another video because already I've been talking for way too long. So we will save some of that for a future video.